So, okay, so you've talked about the start, the individual one-on-one conversations, the how you appealed to teachers' sense of outrage and their interests and their experience of what was actually happening in the classrooms, in the school system, and parents. How do you sustain this now? So I'm really interested in hearing about what the union is doing to sustain this level of organization with the membership as well as with your parent community. So what are some of the structures that you have in place to keep this going, to keep these levels of high participation and community and parent alliance building?
Yeah, so a lot of it is like you're behaving as if the house is always on fire, right? That's just a natural day-to-day. It's like you've got a fire hose stuck to your mouth all the time, and you got to be careful, right? The Puerto Rican Teachers Association president says, "Sin prisa, pero sin pausa." Like we can't stop, but you don't want to go too fast. So the structural changes, just slight tilts in the right direction, can make our work and our lives a lot easier. So what we did is really just adjust what already existed and make it more effective. We didn't totally transform our union structures. We didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We just thought carefully about, well, what was the intention? Why do we have all of these people who call up delegates the day before a meeting to say, hey, there's a meeting tomorrow, bye, click? Like, is that the most effective use of those people's time? What other role could those people play? And are those the right people? Because typically it was somebody who got the position because they knew somebody or they helped get the officers elected, not because they were effective organizers or because they gave a shit about other members in other schools. So we recalibrated that. And some of our own cadre in the caucus were not happy. We said, frankly, you're not the best person for this job. We're picking somebody else. Maybe they're a little bit unknown in terms of the political affiliation, but they're a damn good organizer, so we're going to pick them. And so,
because they were appointed.
These were appointed
Not
positions.
elected.
So these are like, 25 people who call up our delegates on an ongoing basis when there's campaigns, when there's events. The previous union, the approach was, Field of Dreams. You guys seen that movie with Kevin Costner? We build it and they will come. We'll call a rally and miraculously everybody's going to show up. Well, that doesn't work that way. People are busy. They have to have self-interest in whatever you're doing. They have to see their problems in that action. And so you have to start having those organizing conversations. So we retooled our phone bank system. Typically, unions use that for what? Elections, right? It's like, hey, we vote for this guy who's going to betray us after we elect him. Yeah, sure. That's a great way to establish rapport with members, right? So what we did instead was use those structures. We put people through a summer of training in organizing where they went to house visits with our members. And they had one of their objectives was they had to get in the door and sit down in the living room. That was part of their task. So they could have a full-fledged conversation what was going on with that person in their life and their vision, their hopes and dreams, what commitments would they make to realize those things. And those people became our phone bankers. In the previous union, it was the loyalists who wanted, $10 an hour and a sandwich. And that was sufficient. And they were rude and ineffective on the phone for reasons that you can imagine. That changed. And we took some lumps for it because typically it was the lowest paid members who automatically were slotted into those positions. But it was the right thing to do. So that's just some examples.
Right.
We can get into more if you want.
And then, what about parents and communities? So in terms of maintaining those alliances, what does the Chicago Teachers Union have in place?
Yeah. So we've established a community coalition that was based, and this is where there's no substitute for just the grit and the nuts and bolts and the hard work of establishing real relationships. And it was because a lot of us were involved in community campaigns that in some cases were unrelated to the schools prior to coming into office. Part of it was our projects as social justice educators and connecting our students with community issues. And that established relationships. We grew those relationships as a caucus into a coalition to fight school closings because there was a lot of unity around that issue within Chicago and the nonprofit community. And then we translated that into a formal coalition once we became union leaders. We did get rid of some of the groups we had initially worked with who took up a lot of space. They had a lot of opinions, but didn't contribute much when it came to turnout. And so that wasn't fair that they got this oversized presence at the table. Hard decisions need to be made. Like we didn't always feel great about making those decisions, but we knew they were the right ones.
What happens when you raise the expectations of your members and the public, and you aren't actually able to win everything that you've been fighting for, or even most? We're all familiar with the pull to manage expectations, actually, and sometimes our unions might even engage in lowering expectations at times because we know the larger context that we're involved in. I mean, we're in an intense austerity agenda time. So if you could talk about your experiences in Chicago, that would be great.
You know, people just kind of gravitate to things that are easy to think about if they haven't been kind of challenged and oriented around what are the possibilities. And so it's our job as leadership to really raise those questions. And it changes the way that people respond. It does. I've seen it 100 times. There's a science to it. It's a method. So, we've got to do that again and do it better this time. And that's what raises expectations. Because if people don't know that you can demand for wild things that they would think unimaginable, they're never going to try. If you don't ask them or don't suggest it or don't propose it or don't talk about, well, how could it work? What would it look like? What would it feel like? Who would be on our side? How does that play out? What's the reaction? How do we inoculate based on what we predict are the responses from, the city and the elite? So I do think that what the BC leader said is important. Like his quote was, "We're not ecstatic about the settlement." That's really important to be honest about that stuff. That's good. That's healthy. Because you're saying, hey, look, we didn't get everything we could get. You know what? If we got everything we could get, we'd be living in a socialist country. We wouldn't have to have a union, maybe. Maybe. But yeah, we didn't get what we want. We got to keep fighting, people. Like this ain't gonna happen overnight. These rich people were trying to steal everything. Wall Street and the mayor and his criminal friends are not gonna hand it to us in gift wrapping. They're not going to. So when people understand that, and you can have a real conversation and strategic discussion around it, they're mature adults. They can take risks. How do we form these unions? We formed them because people took illegal actions. They didn't exist. They weren't allowed. There was no legal precedent. And they went and did it anyway. They risked their lives. They risked their jobs. We got to get back there.
Okay. So I think I've got... So I've just got one more question, actually, and then we can throw it open. So we've been hearing that Karen Lewis, the president of the Chicago Teachers Union, will be running for mayor in Chicago. So is this a positive development?
Unequivocally, yes, I would say. I was here a couple of years ago and spoke to many of you, and I was like, wow, you guys are about to get rid of your mayor. Congratulations. And 2 years later. So I guess, we'll be the first to do it, hopefully. And I think it's an opportunity to raise bigger questions about what's happening in Chicago. And Karen is polling above the mayor right now, believe it or not. And here's, former chief of staff of Obama, darling of the Democratic National Committee, top fundraiser, has $14 million in his war chest. She has zero, and she's out polling this guy. And it has everything to do with the popular struggle that we've engaged in. He was polling at 75% prior to our contract campaign. He's down, I think 93% of the black community want him out. And I think his popularity is at 29% overall. That being said, he's the comeback kid. Like, they will sink millions of dollars into this campaign to save him, because he's a strategic ally and chess piece in their program for school privatization. So it's going to be incumbent upon us to really talk about bigger issues. You know, what's happening in Chicago? Why are poor people leaving in droves? Why are we losing so much affordable housing? Why does the mayor say, you know, we don't want to just follow the market, we want to accelerate beyond it? And what does that mean for working families? And what's our position on affordable housing, mental health facilities, a trauma center? Right now, young black men are dying in droves because there's no trauma center on the south side of Chicago where people are being shot. They have to go all the way to the suburbs. You know, so issues along those lines that really talk about how we envision a transformation away from the global city to one that's humane, that takes care of people, that provides basic essential services for all. Double per pupil funding for children, you know, like have some visionary ideas about what it could look like if she were elected. So I think it's a real opportunity. And I'll just end by saying, you know, I hope that if we have a Freedom Winter in Chicago, that we'll see some of you. And if you can't make it, you know, there will probably be opportunities to contribute, put it on Facebook, you know, tell your friends to donate yourself, because this is a big deal. There's like a grassroots populist revolt that's happening in big cities across the country. And you're just seeing the initial stages, but it's happening in New York with de Blasio, it's happening in Newark with Raj Baraka, you know, Jackson, Mississippi with Chokwe Lumumba. There's something different that's going on. The $15 an hour, Sawant in Seattle. There's something changing in the body politic and the popular opinion, and we need to take advantage, and I think Karen doing this is really important for that reason.
Thank you. Thank you.